Welcome to day 21 of 21 Days of Mindfulness. I apologize for being a day late. Tried to record, just didn't work out. Sometimes that happens, but here I am. And I'm super excited to talk about the next steps with mindfulness. But I thought that it was kind of fitting to maybe do a quick recap of the last 21 days and some of the topics that we covered. So, to start off the journey, we started with the present moment awareness because, if you're starting off with mindfulness, we have to become aware of our present moment because most of us are living in this state of autopilot where we're all up in our head and we are not fully aware that we're living our lives in kind of like this autopilot, that we're all up in our heads and we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about the future, and what's happening is we're neglecting our present moment. So present moment awareness and just becoming mindful of the simplest thing, which is your breath, right? It's a very cleansing process and a very grounding process to just understand that, hey, this moment is here and I'm connecting to it, I'm grounding to it. The next thing that we talked about was the thinking mind versus the sensing mind, and how in mindfulness we want to move to more of a sensing mind. So in this exercise, we talked about using the five senses in order to ground yourself into the present moment, and kind of doing that frequently throughout the day where, you will, okay, I'm driving to work. I am now going to look at what I see. I'm going to use my sense of smell, my sense of taste, all these different things to ground yourself and practice mindfulness using your sensing mind as opposed to thinking about stuff, which is where we want to move away from. The next thing we talked about was body awareness and just being aware of our own bodies because we use our bodies every day and we don't necessarily ground ourselves in our bodies. And I use the word ground a lot because that's really what mindfulness does. Because to me, when we're all up in our head thinking about all these things, our energy's all over the place, right? And when we start using mindfulness to ground us into our present moment, that's where we get centered. That's where we feel the peace. And the five senses exercise was a great way to do that, right? And then the body awareness and just being aware of the body is also a way to do it. So for me, the body awareness also pulls in the element of starting to become aware of what thoughts and emotions do to the body. And I use the example of anxiety, right? When I get anxiety and I'm aware of my body, I can start to feel the tightness in the chest, right? And I can start to recognize the thoughts in the head. And through body awareness, we can start to ground ourselves into the present moment. We can start to, become more aware of our physical body. We then went on to mindful eating and mindful listening and mindful walking. There were just different types of mindfulness that we covered. My favorite's probably mindful eating, to be honest, because a lot of times we just gobble down our food and we don't really enjoy it to the extent we should. Mindful listening is a very good way to practice mindfulness because, there's a lot of things that go on around us and we just don't really pay attention to them, right? And mindful listening is, especially in nature, a beautiful way to practice mindfulness. And then we talked about mindful walking and how that can be a very fun process to do too, practicing mindfulness and really feeling the extent of the body, the coldness of the air, and kind of pulling all these different things together that we had learned with the senses and the feel of the body and kind of putting that all in one little pretty package, right? So then we moved on to mindful driving. And it was a very good thing to bring up because a lot of us spend a lot of time in the car. And being able to use that as a sacred space for yourself and practice mindfulness is a very beautiful thing in itself, right? It doesn't have to be a stressful situation. Driving your car can be a very cleansing and sacred opportunity to practice mindfulness, pretty much. And then we shifted gears a little bit after we talked about those types of mindfulness, and I introduced the topic of the ego. And, to me and a lot of the spiritual teachers that I follow, the ego is essentially the voice in the head that's talking all the crazy stuff, pretty much, right? The ego is very much so concerned about the externals and identifying itself with things like I am my job, I am how much money I have, I am this, I am that, labeling things, right? And through the ego, that's where, if we start to understand the ego and the many faces of the ego, we can start to disidentify ourselves from the voice in the head, the thoughts in the head, and really start to say, okay, this voice in my head that's talking all this negative stuff and saying all this crazy stuff sometimes, that's not me. And as you disidentify with this voice in the head, you say, okay, this voice, and I want to give it a name, right? We'll say Bob. Bob is always up in my head. He's saying that I'm not good enough. He's saying that you suck. You are this, you are this. And when I hear Bob's voice and he talks about the same stuff over and over again, right, it makes me feel sad. It makes me feel anxiety, and I feel that in my body, right? So as you are able to disidentify yourself with this voice, then you have the power to move yourself back into the present moment, to move yourself into a positive state, right? So for me, when I, understood fully what the ego was, and I understood what the voice was doing and how it was making me feel, I then understood that as the observer of the voice, that's not me. And therefore, I have a choice of what I think about. I have a choice of how I will feel. So I use mindfulness as a way to move away from the ego. Now, am I egoless? No, I am not. I struggle with my ego, as does anybody on this human experience. It loves to rear its head. And, through mindfulness and meditation, over time, I have been able to break down the walls of the ego. And I continue to break it down. And being in an egoless state is honestly one of my, it's like my goal in life. I want to be egoless. So, the ego to me was a very big thing to bring up because it's a big part of mindfulness. And then we talked about, being able to recognize, these emotions that we're feeling through the RAIN process. So the RAIN process is a very good way to recognize the emotion. R, accept your present moment. A, investigate, which is I, why am I feeling this way? And then N would be the non-judgment of it. And non-judgment is a very big part of mindfulness. So being able to look at these thoughts that are coming through your head, these emotions that are coming in your body, and to disidentifying yourself with them, you have to look at them non-judgmentally and say it's neither good, it's neither bad, right? And just see it as an observer, an outside observer. I gave the example of the scientist observing the monkey, right? What is the monkey doing? The monkey's having bad thoughts. The monkey feels this, right? But you're not attaching yourself to the thoughts and the emotions, essentially. And then we talked about anger, because anger, in my humble opinion, is one of the lowest level emotions that any of us can feel, right? And releasing anger, because it's the poison that will poison all of us, right? And if you can release anger and work through mindfulness and meditation to release anger, you're just going to see that your life, it gets better. You have more energy. You have more compassion towards yourself, towards others. And a lot of times anger, it comes from sadness or comes from different things. There's always a deeper issue within anger. And addressing anger front on in yourself is a good way to figure out the shadows that you need to work through yourself, right? There have been times that I was angry. And when I go deeper into why am I angry and I release that anger, you will not believe how good it feels. And when you release anger, you are left with, the compassion, the peace, the love, because none of us need to carry any of that stuff on. I mean, who has time for that, right? The other thing is I talked about the law of attraction. And, basically that thoughts create emotions and emotions become things. And this is, kind of using the Joe Dispenza methodology. There's a lot of stuff out there on the law of attraction. The Secret is a very big documentary on it. And, it is true. You got to be careful about the things that you think about. You got to be mindful of the things that you're thinking about, because these things do come true. And we all have that universal power to send off this vibrational frequency out into the universe, and the universe is just going to boomerang back to us what we're sending out. That's why, if you are a very positive person, you attract more positivity into your life. If you're a negative person, you're going to attract more negativity into your life. So therefore, using mindfulness as a way to, to shape your future the way that you want it to be is a very cool thing. So law of attraction, not going to get too deep into it, but it is out there. It does exist. At least I believe in it. A lot of other folks do too. And I have seen it firsthand. We then talked about positive energy. So I discussed, gratitude, which is basically a way of life, like living in a state of gratitude. I talked about how I smile, how I take positive energy from these things that happened to the past. But there's lots of different ways to generate positivity. And, it could be that, positive energy comes from yoga for you. I don't know, but you have to find out what generates positive energy and do more of it, right? That's why I say that gratitude is so big. It's so awesome, because it really is a way of life, and it works for everybody, people. Just to practice gratitude on a daily basis is a beautiful thing. And then we got into the who am I? And that kind of goes along with the ego, right? Who is the observer and who is the observed? And asking yourself very deep questions. And that's kind of that further disidentification of the thoughts and you, which you is the essence. And again, that's more of a spiritual aspect of it. No, not all of you are into that, and that's cool. But that's just my thought on it. And then we talked about being mindful of our inputs, basically our environment, our people, our things in our life. And, saying that I want to be around positive people. I want a environment that makes me feel peaceful. I want things in my life that bring me more peace. And really trying to gauge yourself and how you can maybe change some things to make your life more peaceful, make your life more mindful with all the different inputs that we've got going on. And then we talked about being mindful with our relationships. The people that, are near and dear to our heart, that, it could be your spouse that they come in from work and you don't even speak to each other. You're like on your phone or you're drinking a glass of wine and they just walk right past you and like, this is where we need to give people space. This is where we need to connect to the people that we love the most. And being mindful of our relationships is we respect them, we see them, right? We don't judge them. Just like we don't want to be judged, we shouldn't judge someone else, right? So being mindful in our relationships, especially our close relationships, can generate an unbelievable amount of positivity, because the communities that thrive the most are the ones that have the sense of community. And, at least in the United States, it's sometimes very much so in our culture to be like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to associate with other people, right? And it's just a way that we sometimes come off as cold. We don't really have as much of the community, right? We're not connected to each other so much. And the sense of community and living in an open heart space with people and really helping people and really not judging people is a very beautiful thing. So be mindful of your relationships. So I would just say that, after we've gone through all of these different things, there's a lot more to learn. Of course, this is kind of like an intro, but it's really about creating a mindfulness routine and a meditation routine. So the mindfulness routine is figuring out when you can set certain periods to practice mindfulness, right? Maybe you practice mindfulness every day in your car. Maybe you practice it before you go to bed and you do a certain type of mindfulness, like the five senses, or I'm going to eat a certain meal and I'm going to eat this meal mindfully. And over time, it becomes a habit. It's a way of life, right? And you become more observing. And then, you can even have on a weekly basis, you can have certain days where you set intents for things. So like, let's say Monday is gratitude day. Tuesday is non-judgment day. Wednesday is acceptance of your present moment day. And being able to kind of go through those things and have a certain intent for a day of the week even is a good way to be able to practice that particular skill set. And it builds over time. So you say, okay, it's Monday. I'm going to be grateful today. I'm going to practice gratitude. Let me see what I can do. And at the end of the day, you're like, right? And then the meditation routine is very critical. And I've talked to a lot of folks. They feel like, oh, I can't meditate. I don't have time. Make time, people. Make time. Meditation, prayer, it works. I can tell tenfold when I do not meditate. If I start skipping out on my meditations, I become a basket case. And the meditations are basically just emptying the mind and plugging a cord into source or the universe and charging yourself up. That's the way I like to look at it. So like if I'm a machine and I deplete my energy every day, I go to meditate, I am taking my machine's plug and I'm putting it into the universe, and the universe is sending me the energy and helping me to release all the bad that I don't want and take in the good and to refill my cup, so to speak. So I meditate in the mornings, at lunch, at night. I also do it when I'm feeling like I need a meditation moment, and it makes all the difference. So, my dear friends, I cannot thank you enough for being a part of this journey with me. It was very good for me to go through it as well. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I wish you a lot of luck on your journey, and you are always welcome to reach out to me. Until next time.